Hello viewers, my name is Charisma Nyambalo from Umtiza High School, and welcome to the Eastern Cape Department of Education broadcast studio. Today's lesson is about dynamics of imperfect markets, mainly focusing on monopoly. I will be covering this topic for your full understanding. In this lesson, we are going to look in detail or discuss in detail the characteristics of monopoly, and we'll start looking at the characteristics, discuss it using without graphs, and also we're going to look at the graphs on monopoly. And we also going to look at the cost curves that like the average revenue, marginal revenue, and the relationship between these cost curves. And we're also going to look at economic profit, economic loss, and the long run equilibrium position. So to start with, we are going to describe the term monopoly. Monopoly is a market structure that exists when there is a single seller of a product. Mono means one. So when we say monopoly, this is a market structure that is made up of a single seller. There is only one seller that dominates the whole industry, that is selling a product that has got no close substitutes and where barriers block entry into the market completely. So there is only one seller in this market structure. Moving on, we're going to look at monopoly under the following subheadings. We're going to look at the number of sellers, the nature of the product, entrance into the market, control over price, information. We're going to also look at some examples: demand curve, economic profit and loss, decision making, collusion, productive or technical efficiency, and also allocative efficiency. To start with, I'm going to look at the number of firms or businesses or producers. The monopolist is the only supplier of a product, which implies that there is no competition in this market structure, since there is only one seller of a product. And also, the monopolist is responsible for the industry's total output. So whatever is going to be produced in the industry, it comes from this single seller. For example, we've got in South Africa, we've got De Beers. It is the only firm or business that is allowed to exploit diamonds in South Africa. So it's the single supplier of diamonds. We also have got Eskom, which is also the single supplier of electricity in South Africa. We're also going to look at the nature of product. How does the product look like? So in monopoly, the nature of product is unique. So when we say the nature of product is unique, we mean that it is different. You cannot find a similar product somewhere else. So we say the product is unique and has got no close substitutes, which means that the consumer's choice is very limited, since they are producing a unique product which we cannot find anywhere else. So we need to remember that we are saying there are no close substitutes, because we're going to come back to this point where we say, we did not say that there are no substitutes, but there are no close substitute, because the product is unique. For example, if we are talking of the nature of product in terms of Eskom, the nature of product, the product we are talking about here is electricity, and there is no close substitutes for electricity. The product also has a relatively inelastic demand curve, which means that the quantity demanded is less responsive to the price. So even if the price of the product goes up, the quantity demanded is going to change by a smaller percentage, since it's the only product that can be used in the and does not have any close substitutes. So it makes that's why it has got a very steep demand curve, which implies that it's not very responsive to price changes. Market entry. With market entry, we are looking at we are referring to how easy or difficult it is to get into the industry, how easy or difficult for businesses to enter or leave the market. In the case of monopoly, the market is entirely, all completely blocked. This is very important when answering questions to do with the market entry. We are saying it's completely blocked, entirely blocked. And this makes it difficult for other suppliers to enter into the market. And now we need to look at some of those reasons why it is difficult for other sellers to enter into the market. What are these some of the barriers to entry that prevent them? We have got barriers such as high startup costs or high development costs. They act as a barrier to entry because there is a high cost that is required. It can also be a limited size of the market. Maybe the market is very small for it to have 2 or more participants or suppliers. Or maybe it could be because the market, the business is the one that has got exclusive ownership of raw materials and not any other business. It could also be because of patents. Patents, these are legal and exclusive rights to produce a certain product. So if the firm is holding a patent, no any other firm can produce a similar product. It can also be because there is licensing that is required. So if the other producers are not having that license, it means that they cannot enter into the same industry. It can also because they own the sole rights to produce a certain product. So no any other producer can produce the same product since they do not have the sole rights. It can also be due to import restrictions. Maybe the government put a restriction in importing raw materials that are needed to produce the product because they want to promote a single seller that is in the domestic market to produce the product. So these barriers to entry can be divided into 2 major groups. Let us look at those 2 major groups. We have got what are known as, so these barriers to entry can result into 2 types of monopolies, which is natural monopolies and artificial monopolies. With natural monopolies, the barriers to entry are economic in nature. So this could be high development costs. It requires a lot of money to come up, to set up the business. So high development costs, high capital that is required can result in a natural monopoly. For example, in the provision of electricity, it requires a lot of money in order to build the power stations that are required. It also requires a lot of money for transmission lines to distribute the electricity. This can actually cost billions of rands that are required. So these can actually result in natural monopolies. These natural monopolies are frequently owned or regulated by the government. Is the one that can provide it. Since it has got high costs that are required, or billions of rands that are required. So the government is the one that will come in and provide them, but they tend to be owned by and regulated by the government, so that they can serve the whole market at a lower price instead of having more businesses. And we said the barriers to entry here, the most important thing to note is that the causes or the barriers to entry are economic in nature. There is there is a lot of money or billions of rands that are required to set it up. The other the other barriers to entry will cause or will give rise to what is known as an artificial monopoly. With artificial monopoly, the barriers to entry are not economic in nature, which means that in this case, the other businesses or the other sellers might be having the startup money or the capital, but the barriers to entry this time, they are not economic in nature. These barriers to entry can be a patent right. So you do not have this patent right to produce a certain product. And we said a patent right is an exclusive right, or a legal and exclusive right to produce a certain product. So once you do not have that patent right, you are not allowed to produce that product. Another reason why we can have an artificial monopoly or another barrier is licensing. The government might give licenses to produce a certain product, and that will give rise to an artificial monopoly. In South Africa, licenses are given to radio, TV, broadcasting, telephone and cellular phone communication networks, and commercial production of electricity. So once you do not have that licensing, you cannot provide that product, and it gives rise to artificial monopoly. Now let us move on to control over price. We want to check now how much control does a monopolist have on price. Now, a monopolist has got full control over price, which means that a monopolist can set its own price. It is also regarded as a price maker, a price giver, because it can choose on its demand curve, it can choose the price and quantity combination that suits it. So it's unlike with perfect markets that do not have any influence over price. We are saying monopoly is the exact opposite. It has got full control over price. Now, because it has got full control over price, there is a possibility to exploit consumers because they are the only supplier. So there is a possibility. We are saying a possibility because that is not always the case. So sometimes there might be a possibility of exploiting consumers, and they do it by restricting output or by reducing output so that they can charge a high price. So once they reduce the quantity, they can actually increase the price. That's what we mean by exploiting consumers. Then consumers will have now to buy the product at a higher price. However, like I said, it's not always the case. There are reasons to that, and this is actually a possible exam question. Why is it that monopolists, even though they are price makers, they cannot charge excessively high prices? They've got full control over price, but they cannot charge excessively high prices. What could be the reason? The reason is because a monopolist, it has got control over the price, but does not have control over our demand. So consumers still, they can have control over price, but they do not have control over demand. So if the prices go up, we still have got a choice. We are not forced to buy the product that has gone up too much. So if electricity goes up by too much, we can still go. Remember, we said we do not have closed substitutes, but that does not mean that there are no substitutes. So if electricity goes up, we can still buy gas, we can still buy paraffin, or we can still use firewood for cooking. So they do not have control over our demand. And also, us as consumers, we have got a limited budget. So if prices go up, our budget, our budgets are not going to allow us to keep on buying, even if the price is excessive or too high. So we therefore look for other alternatives. And a monopolist, just like any other market structure, it is competing for the favors of the consumers. There are other products available. And because they compete for the consumer's favor, which means their money, they cannot charge excessively high prices, knowing that they will go and buy other substitutes that are available, even though they are not close substitutes. Another reason for that is because a monopolist, remember we said with some monopolists, they are regulated by the government. For example, ESCOM, when it wants to increase electricity, it does not just increase it, it's regulated by the government. So NESA is there to regulate the increase in prices of electricity. So therefore, the increase in price is affected by government regulation. Let's move on to market information. In monopoly, both buyers and the single seller have got full information about what is happening or the current market conditions. They know what is exactly is happening in the market or in the industry. So it means that there is a high degree of transparency. Monopoly, since it's a single seller, there is no incentive for it to hide information from the consumers. So there is complete or full knowledge about the market conditions. The demand curve. The demand curve of a monopolist is downward sloping, just like a normal demand curve. It is downward sloping from left to right. And because it is downward sloping, it means that in order for a monopolist to sell more, it has got to reduce its price. So, and remember, we also said that the demand curve for a monopolist is also inelastic because there are no closed substitutes, which means that it is not price sensitive. It is relatively inelastic. But the demand curve for a monopolist is also the same as is also equal to its average revenue. So for every additional unit sold by a monopoly, marginal revenue is less than the price. Thus, the marginal revenue always lie below the demand curve. So always the marginal revenue is not the same as the demand curve, because in order for a monopolist to sell more, it has got to reduce the price. So the marginal revenue is always less than the price. Therefore, the marginal revenue will lie below the demand curve. Let's move on to economic profit or loss. A monopolist can earn economic profit, can earn economic loss in the short run. But in the long run, a monopolist can still earn an economic profit. So if a monopolist was earning an economic loss in the short run, so if it was making an economic loss in the short run, in the long run, it will adjust its plant. It is going to increase production and yield more economic profit in the long run. So it will have to adjust its plant up until it can make an economic profit in the long run. If a monopoly was making an economic profit in the short run, it will have to continue expanding its production scale or capacity to make more economic profit even in the long run. So in summary, we say that a monopolist can make an economic profit, can make an economic loss in the short run, but in the long run, it can continue making an economic profit. So let's move on to decision making. A monopoly business makes a decision independently because there are no competitors, so there is no interdependence. It makes its own decisions. But in some cases, government law can affect its decision. For example, we talked about ESCOM. It might be influenced by NESA in times where it needs to increase the price. Collusion. When it comes to collusion, there is no collusion in monopoly. Since it's a single business, then there is no one to collude with. Productive and allocative efficiency. A monopolist does not achieve both productive or technical efficiency, and also it does not achieve allocative efficiency since it cannot produce the right product mix that is required by consumers. So it doesn't achieve both productive and allocative efficiency. It does not achieve productive efficiency because it cannot produce at the lowest possible cost or at the lowest point of the average cost curve because of the inefficiencies. And we have got some questions here that you can attempt doing on your own. We're going to look at the relationship between demand curve, average revenue, and marginal revenue. So, unlike in perfect markets, the demand curve for monopoly is downward sloping from left to right, and it shows an inelastic demand curve. But when drawing it, it is very important to start by drawing the axis, by showing the axis, which means the horizontal and vertical axis. We put the original point, we label quantity, and we label price and revenue. Now, what is important is that when we are drawing it, we should show that we are drawing a steep demand curve, and we label it D, which is equal to average revenue. Now, the marginal revenue is not the same as the average revenue, but it lies below the average revenue or the demand curve. So another important thing is to make sure that when we are coming with the marginal revenue, it starts at the same point. They always start at the same point, the marginal revenue and the average revenue. But as we move, for a monopolist to sell one extra unit, it has got to reduce its price. So the extra income that is earned, which is the marginal revenue, will be dropping or will be decreasing at a faster rate than the decrease in the price, since the marginal revenue is less than the price. We have come to the end of our lesson. You can leave your questions on the comments. Don't forget to leave the name of your school so we give shout outs. Please share, comment, and subscribe to our YouTube channel. Thank you for watching. See you in our next lesson.